Our God is ruler of the nations. Go to the poor, tell their princes and their kings. Tell to the children of our future generations, He is God and He has done amazing things.
Hello everybody, Stephen Baker here again, pastor at Trinity Reformed Church, dean at New Geneva Academy, all of that. Well, we're talking about eschatology. And remember what eschatology is. It simply means, how will God's story end? And what is God's story? Well, God's story is history. And the great thing about it is we're living in it right now. We are living in God's story. You are living in God's story. God wrote you in to His story. That's right. You're not an accident. You didn't just happen. You are very important because God made you. And He put you in this world to be a part of this story that is working itself out under His absolute authority and control. Right? This is just amazing. God put you in your family on purpose so that you would be a part of His story. There you are. You're watching this or listening to it. And why is that? Well, because God wanted you to. He wrote that into the story before you were even made. He wrote that into the story before anything was made. No accidents. God knows exactly what He's doing, and here you are, learning about the story of God and what He's doing in the world and how it will all end, and He wants you to be amazed by this and to worship Him and to obey Him and to do your part that He's given you to do. That all comes from trusting Jesus. We'll get into more of that later, all right? But I just want you to know you're a part of this story, and it's amazing that He has done this. So in our last episode, we were talking about the nations. Remember? Where did the nations come from? Well, they came from disobedience, really. The men after Noah, after the flood, they didn't want to do what God said. They didn't want to fill the earth and subdue it under the authority of God. No, they wanted to stay in one place instead of going out and filling the world. And they wanted to not have God as their king, but they wanted to worship false gods. Gods that are real, they're real creatures, but they're not the true and living God, the eternal one who made the heavens and the earth. They're creatures just like you and me. And that is the worst thing we can do, is instead of worshiping God, the Creator, we end up worshiping the creation. That could mean spirits that are evil. That could mean your car, okay? Or your toys, or your brother's toys, or yourself. We all worship something. None of us don't worship. Okay? And God commands us to worship Him alone. But we like to worship other things because we don't like God telling us what to do. That's our problem. Well, we'll talk more about that later. Remember that God made these nations, gave them different languages, assigned fallen beings to them to be their gods. But something else is happening. We read at the end of our last episode that the nations someday will come and worship the true and living God. All the nations. Well, how is that going to happen? Well, here's how that's going to happen. All right? What happens next in God's story? You have Noah and the flood and the Tower of Babel. What happens next? Well, it's this shift in the story where instead of nations and big groups of people. Everything begins to focus down on one man. And you know his name? His name is Abraham. Abraham. And it says this in Genesis chapter 12. Before he was called Abraham, he's called Abram. All right? Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." So all the nations, right, given over to the worship of false gods, God says, I'm going to start with a new nation. And that nation is going to start with one man, Abram. And I'm going to make promises to that man, and that man is going to have lots of children, and their children will have lots of children, and their children will have lots of children, and their children will have lots of children. And this is going to become a great nation. It'll be a nation that I will make for myself, God says. They're not going to worship the false gods. They will worship me, the one true and living God. That's what God says he's going to do. And he promises to do that with Abraham, with Abram. But notice what he says. Not only is he going to make Abraham, or Abram, into a great nation with all of his children, and their children, and their children, and their children. What else? He says this, "In you, Abram, all the families of the earth will be blessed." All the families of the earth. It's not talking about his family, right? It's talking about all the families from all those other nations, those nations that back then, at that point, were all worshiping false gods. But no, God is going to take Abraham, make Abraham into a great nation, and through that nation, through those people, the people of God, he's going to bless the world. He says this again, right over in chapter 15. God comes to him again, he says this, "After these things the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, 'Do not fear, Abram. I am a shield to you. Your reward will be very great.' Abram said, 'O Lord God, what will you give me, since I am childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus?'" So Abraham didn't have any kids yet. And God keeps saying, "You're going to have lots of kids." And Abraham's like, "Well, I don't have any kids. I've got this guy who lives with me. Is that what you mean?" Abram said, "Since you have given no offspring to me, the one born in my house is my heir." That must be what you're thinking, Lord, right? You're going to give me a lot of children, but not through my children, through this man who grew up in my house. Well, what happens next? "Then behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, 'This man will not be your heir, but one who will come forth from your own body, he shall be your heir.' And he took him outside." So the Lord, the word of the Lord, takes Abram outside, right? Takes him by the arm and says, "Come on, we're going to go outside. I want to show you something." Takes him outside. And he said this, "Now look toward the heavens and count the stars, if you're able to count them." And he said to him, "So shall your descendants be." Now I want you to think about that. A lot of you probably live in the city, right? Or in a town where there's lots of light. And you go outside at night, and you might be able to look up and say, "Well, you know, I can probably count the stars. Because there's the big one over there, that's pretty bright, and oh, that's the Big Dipper, I guess I can count those. I know some of those stars, and I could see some of them." But have you ever been out in the country where it's really, really dark? Imagine this. Abram lives in a desert, and there are no electric lights anywhere in the world yet. So it's completely, totally, perfectly dark. You ever been in a place like that? Even just go out into the country, drive outside, maybe ask your mom and dad sometime to take you in a car at night and drive out of the town, out of the city, into the country, and look up. Got to be a clear night. Look up. See if you can count the stars. Think of how many stars Abram saw. Just blows your mind. Right? How many stars there are? Why is this such a big deal? Because God said to him, count the stars, Abram. That's how many children you're going to have. That's how many descendants you will have. That's amazing. And then look what it says. This is verse 7, or verse 6. Then Abram believed in the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. Abram believed the Lord. Now listen to this, one last passage about Abraham. This is chapter 22, Genesis 17. Indeed, I will greatly bless you, and I will greatly multiply your seed, that's your children, as the stars of the heavens, right? And as the sand which is on the seashore. And your seed, your children, will possess the gate of their enemies. In your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So not only is it the number of the stars, but it's the number of the pieces of sand on the seashore. You ever been to the beach? How would you like to try to count the pieces of sand? You want to try? You better get started. You're not going to be able to do it. It will take forever for you to count the pieces of sand, the stars in the heaven, the sand on the seashore. So what is God saying? Remember what he said to Abraham? All the families of the nations will be blessed through you, and you're going to have children, and they're going to be so many that it literally will be impossible for you to count. As many as the stars in the heaven, as many as the sand on the seashore, that's how many kids you're going to have, Abraham. What does that mean? Well, here's the thing. We know from the New Testament that God wasn't talking about like physical children. Well, he is talking about physical children. He's talking about people, but not like your brothers and sisters, you know? You have brothers and sisters because they were born to your mom and dad. But God is talking about the families of the nations. And what does the Bible say? The Bible says in the New Testament, who is a real child of Abraham? Well, it's anyone who has the same kind of faith that Abraham had. Remember what it said? Abraham believed the Lord, and God said, you're righteous. Okay? He credited it to him as righteousness, counted it to him as righteousness. That's what it means to be a son of Abraham. So, think about this. In Abraham, all the families of the nations will be blessed. Abraham will have as many children, as many descendants as the stars in the heavens and as the sand on the seashore. Count them if you can try, but you can't. What does that mean? What is a true child of Abraham? A true child of Abraham is someone who believes in Jesus. Okay? So, how many people will believe in Jesus? Well, go outside. Go outside. It's got to be really dark. Look up in the sky and try to start counting. Or go to the beach. Okay? And look down at the sand and get out your tweezers and start counting. Look at all that sand. God said that's how many there will be who believe in Jesus. Well, that's interesting. Huh. How is that going to happen? How is that going to happen? Because that doesn't seem to make sense, because I know a lot of people who don't believe in Jesus. Well, next time, we'll begin to see how this is going to happen. All right? Are you one who believes in Jesus? Are you one of those grains of sand? You one of those stars up in the sky that Abraham saw? Does one of those stand for you? Only if you believe in Jesus. Here you are. God put you in a home where your mom and dad keep telling you to believe in Jesus. Let me tell you, that's exactly what you need to do, because every word of this book is true. All right? Well, let's see what happens next.
Our God is moon above the nations. Go tell the poor, tell their princes and their kings. Tell to the children of our future generations, He is God and He has done amazing things. Let's tell the children of our